Hey, what's up guys? The Explanation Pros here. Today, I'll explain an apocalyptic and post-apocalyptic fiction film titled Cargo. Incoming spoilers. The film opens in a boat floating in an Australian river with a family of 3 inside. Immediately, a conflict is seen as the main character Andy tries to initiate contact with another family on land, but the father of the said family shows his gun in a silent but threatening manner. That night, Andy and his wife Kay are arguing about where they should head as a family, because they have a baby, Rosie, and that their supplies are running low. Kay wants them to go ashore and scavenge in a rural town, but Andy insists on the original plan, which is to safely stay in the river toward a supposed refuge. Their argument is cut short when Rosie cries in the background. In the next scene, a child is seen on a tree recreating the experience of using television and remote through rocks. The following day, while drifting in the middle of the river, Andy sees an abandoned boat. He immediately heads toward it to inspect. Andy checks the inside and finds half of it submerged. He then takes a handful of items such as canned food and a bottle of wine. While doing this, he feels something odd with the unchecked cabinet, prompting him to stop his scavenging and then leave. In such a narrow environment, he's not taking any chances. Afterwards, after returning safely to his boat, Kay hugs and kisses Andy. Andy then shows her the loot he managed to scavenge from the boat. Andy then tells Kay that there is nothing to worry about because it is safe. Kay then tells her husband to rest inside the boat while she stays on guard. After her husband sleeps, she then crafts a makeshift mobile for her daughter. She then sees a bottle of wine wrapped in a message, making her curious about the abandoned boat from whence it came. Kay embarks on an abandoned boat alone because her husband told her earlier that it is safe. She is caught unaware by a bite from an unknown creature. In the next scene, Andy wakes up from Rosie's cries. He then comforts and carries his daughter before spotting a trail of blood on the floor. Upon following it, he sees Kay in the bathroom, trying to put pressure on her wound. Andy bandages the wound, with Kay apologizing to him for what is happening. Later, they argue about what bit Kay. Kay tells her husband that it has fingers, implying that it's human, to which Andy responds with anger. He then tells Kay that even if it takes 48 hours to be truly infected, she will bleed out first before that happens, telling her that he has to take her to the hospital. Because of this, the family leaves their boat to walk on land. In the next scene, the child from earlier is shown again. This time, however, the child tosses a dead rabbit on a hole as if feeding something unknown. After seeing a car, the couple places their child inside of it while fixing the said car. Inside the car, Kay attaches the makeshift mobile that she crafted earlier for her daughter. Outside, Andy anxiously fills the car with fuel. Kay then spots a zombie, signaling Andy by using the blinker of the car. Luckily, Andy manages to get in the car and the family drives away in haste. After driving far, they decide to stop by in the middle of nowhere. Kay decides to change Rosie's diaper, performing it in the hood of the car while Andy checks the map. After briefly taking his gaze away from Kay, Kay suddenly vanishes from sight and Andy checks up on her. There, he sees Kay convulsing on the ground. Afterwards, while they are driving away, Kay wakes up to find that her wound is becoming sticky, indicating that she is slowly turning into a zombie. Because of this, she screams at Andy to stop the car, limpingly running away from her family as soon as they stop moving. Andy follows her, but Kay pushes him away, telling him that this cannot be controlled. Andy hugs her, making Kay cry from this feeling of dread. In the next scene, Kay sits under the shade of a tree. Andy urges her to go to the hospital, forcefully taking Kay to the car. While driving, Andy sees an Aboriginal man standing in the middle of the road. He manages to avoid the man, but they crash instead. As a result, Kay is impaled by a piece of wood. Filled with shock with what's happening, Andy loses his consciousness. Upon waking up, Andy finds a note written in blood by his wife's side, telling him to save Rosie. He then finds out that his wife has already turned, butting him in the process. Andy manages to escape and take his daughter to safety. Andy then shouts in anger for everything that happened, even denying the bite mark he received from his wife. However, he regains hope upon seeing Rosie. Andy, carrying a crying Rosie on his back, marches on the Australian savannah despite the sweltering heat. As they stop on a tree log, Andy sees the Aboriginal man from earlier. Filled with rage, Andy confronts the man, but he finds out that it is actually a restrained zombie with a stick upon its mouth. The child from earlier appears, telling Andy to stop because that is her dad. The child, Tumi, lures her father away from the scene by cutting her palm. Seeing this, Andy decides to walk away, eventually reaching the town that his wife suggested earlier. The place is seemingly abandoned, but Andy finds out soon enough that it isn't. A school teacher, Ida, tells Andy to sit down so she can heal his wound, and she does. She then tells Andy that her students, Aboriginals, have gone and returned to the old ways. Afterwards, Andy sees a fire from afar. There, Tumi's mother is searching for her daughter, but Tumi hides herself and her father because Aboriginals kill and burn the infected. Tumi then reminisces about her father when he was still human. The same night, while he is about to shave his rugged beard, Andy falls to the ground and uncontrollably convulses like his wife from earlier. The following day, Andy sees from his watch that he only has 32 hours left before he turns. He then finds Rosie missing, but eventually sees Rosie carried by Ida. He then greets Ida, and Ida shows him a picture of Willie Bell, which is actually Tumi's infected father. She then tells Andy to search for them. Unaware that Willie has turned, Andy and Rosie then leave. After walking far, Andy sees a man named Vic, who has just shot a zombie near Andy. Vic is stuck and buried by a heavy object in some hole, and Andy helps him immediately after spotting a few zombies. Vic gives him the key to his car, and Andy drives a car a bit to remove the heavy material attached to the car. They then leave in Vic's car. They then drive to Vic's makeshift place. There, Andy sees Vic's supposed wife, Lorraine. After Vic gives Lorraine a necklace, Lorraine half-heartedly compliments it, quickly removing it once Vic leaves the place. Upon returning, Vic instructs Lorraine to take Rosie upstairs while he and Andy go away to zombie hunt. After zombie hunting, Andy sees that Vic is using a live human in a cage as a bait for the zombies, and the human in question is Tumi, horrifying Andy in silence. Meanwhile, while calming Rosie down, Lorraine finds a sticky liquid attached to Rosie, indicating that she has been in the presence of zombies. They then get home, with Vic awkwardly kissing Lorraine. That night, while his bitten arm uncontrollably shakes, Andy suddenly thinks of killing himself because he perceives that Rosie will be safe in Vic and Lorraine's company. He tearfully kisses Rosie before sneaking out of the house. Outside, he attempts to inject something in his head, but Lorraine, carrying Rosie, stops him. Lorraine reveals to him that Vic is not her husband and that she is held captive by Vic. Andy then proposes that they could leave from this place. However, Vic suddenly enters the scene, immediately knocking down Andy with the butt of his rifle. Andy wakes up, finding himself beside Tumi, inside a cage, but they manage to escape when Andy attaches raw gut in the rope that opens their gate, baiting the zombies into pulling the rope. The two then head back to Vic's place to retrieve Rosie and Lorraine. They manage to leave, but Vic wakes up. Lorraine shows herself to Vic in an attempt to stop him, but Vic quickly shoots, realizing too late that he had already shot Lorraine. On the other hand, Andy and Tumi run away. They also manage to hide from the relentlessly pursuing Vic. That night, Tumi discovers that Andy has been bitten when she suddenly sees Andy shaking uncontrollably. The following day, Tumi tells Andy that he and her father can still be cured by a shaman. However, Andy, the bearer of bad news, tells Tumi that he and Tumi's father cannot be cured anymore, which upsets Tumi, prompting her to run away as fast as she can. Tumi then runs towards her father, but her father is sadly already killed. Not wanting to see this reality, Tumi tearfully hits herself in the head with a rock. Andy stops Tumi from doing so, and Tumi tells Andy that this is his fault. Andy leaves her, but not before telling her that she's welcome to follow them. After Andy eventually loses consciousness while walking, Tumi soon decides to follow them after hearing Rosie's cries. After walking far, the three finally reach the river. However, while heading toward the boat, they decide to first inspect a nearby mobile home. There, they see the remnants of a birthday celebration. After healing Tumi's self-inflicted head wounds, Andy then decides to search for the family that was there before while Tumi herself stays inside the mobile home. In his walk with Rosie, Andy finally comes across the family, but he eventually realizes something is wrong despite the laughs and the giggles of the children. Sure enough, the father is actually digging their graves because he got bitten himself. He finds no other solution but to kill his family and then himself. Andy walks away, flinching with every sound of gunfire that reverberates in the air. Afterwards, Andy takes the man's gun and thinks about killing himself as well, but decides against it after seeing Rosie. Tumi enters the scene after hearing the gunshots. They then decide to walk on the railroad track to go back to the Aboriginals. While walking, they spot a cloud of smoke rising in the distance. Upon heading there through a dark tunnel, Andy spots a man by the fire and quickly hides with Rosie and Tumi behind a vehicle. The man is none other than Vic. Vic hears Rosie's brief but echoing cry, prompting him to approach them slowly. Andy gives Rosie and his bag to Tumi while he confronts Vic with his newfound gun. They then fight while Tumi takes Rosie inside Vic's car. After fighting, Vic comes out from the darkness to drag Tumi out of his car. Shortly after, a limping Andy soon moves from toward Vic. However, he sees Vic cradling Rosie. Andy sits near Vic, telling him to give back Rosie. At first, Vic refuses, but he eventually returns Rosie without a fuss. They then leave Vic mourning for the loss of Lorraine. The three continue their trail. As they are walking, Andy slowly turns into a zombie. They eventually stop as Andy decides to tie a piece of meat to a stick so that he can still follow it when he turns. Toomey then watches Andy's eyes get filled with sticky liquid, eventually becoming a zombie. Andy's plan works, as he follows the piece of meat while carrying Toomey and Rosie, like a donkey following a carrot. Because of this, they eventually reach the Aboriginals' camp. The Aboriginals want to kill Andy immediately, but Toomey stops them. Toomey then sprays Kay's perfume toward Andy. As the smell permeates Andy's nose, Andy is seen pondering, as if he slightly recognizes his humanness, even for a short while. After this, Andy is finally mercifully killed. Afterwards, the Aboriginals march into their secret refuge. There, they are happily greeted by other survivors. As they take care of Rosie, they see the words, "Thank you," painted on her stomach. The film ends with one final shot of the makeshift mobile crafted by Kay, which is now hanging peacefully on a tree branch. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and also subscribe to my channel for more videos like this. See you in the next video. Please hit the like button and also subscribe to my channel for more videos like this. See you in the next video.